Pleased to introduce Avinash Deshpande from Logitech. Avinash is the Chief Software Architect at Logitech, driving architectural patterns in all facets of data to bring innovation and agility to business. He will be presenting a talk titled, Logitech Accelerates Cloud Analytics Using Data Virtualization. Please join me in welcoming Avinash.
Right, we'll start after lunch sessions are difficult, right? So it's going to go over that. So that's the topic. We'll talk about more around the architectures, patterns that we use, data velocity to it. Typically Logitech, people know about is all mice and keyboard, but we do a whole lot. I think that's 20% of our portfolio. We do a lot of IoT in the digital video space and music, and things like that. So we'll talk about more use cases. Just a brief about what Logitech is. Essentially, your digital experience is being connected, right? We look at every ecosystem where we could support or supplement the peripherals that would interact with the hardware that you use. We want to make sure something where people interact, collaborate. We have collaboration tools, cameras which interact in real time. That's sort of our product portfolio, where it goes beyond just mice and keyboard. We are close ties with Apple, so every time there's an Apple peripheral, it actually has a Logitech part to it. I'm actually using one of those presenters that you see there, sort of an IoT connected device here. We obviously have music space where the headphones and the booms are famous, and we have video collaboration. Home automation is a huge thing where we work in that ecosystem where you have buttons like Fog, which have interacted real-time IoT where you can talk to any of those peripherals. The cameras, and then obviously gaming is used. This is all PC gaming, and all of these are IoT connected devices from a gaming perspective. So my job essentially was to map all of the hardware and software of things that we have at Logitech, ensure we are able to scale the analytic offering around it to engineering that is on CTO side as well as on the CIO perspective. So all of data insight that we provision, it needs to be more proactive, make sure we have real-time information to act on from engineering as well as from an IT perspective. So what I did was, first of the charter that was to map out all the data use cases that we have, and you would kind of see that we have from structured all the way to unstructured data, batch to real-time processing, and I tried to map every facet that we have in-house and what data it would generate, and kind of figure out in that metrics where it lies. And you can see potentially on this side of the fence, right, you have all of these unstructured data, which is from an engineering perspective, but it's critical for the business to run there. And then you have the typical marketing funnels on the other side, obviously sales channel management, demand forecasting, which are again critical for business, but it's more from a business enablement process, right? So it does have use cases for engineering as well as regular business from marketing and sales perspective. So I will kind of digress here. You see a lot of advanced analytics when we talk about machine learning, text mining. Why one would need it is with more and more competitive markets available and products being competing, we need to have those processing made available. That's probably why big data invitation for me to talk about more of these is, can I go beyond just my data consumption from a reporting perspective or a tactical reporting to go act on that, maybe run some sentiment engines or forecast it effectively, look at competitive products and align them with our product portfolio. So this exercise actually made us aware that what kind of data do we really have in the whole ecosystem at Logitech. So then we kind of mapped it to where do we want to take this whole ecosystem. Do I really just look at analytics, which says what has happened so far, right? And do I really look at why did it happen, to go to the diagnostic part to it, which would sort of bring it full circle that it should not happen again. But do I go beyond that and say, last Christmas time, my product didn't do well because of something else. So can I predict that this can happen again? Would I have some pipeline issues on the production side to it? Go beyond that, and then what would be the prescription for it? So now I'm actually went through not just what happened to why it happened. We cannot predict future, right? So we do forecasting every week for 52 weeks ahead of time, figure out what events are coming in, and we kind of align that data over there. We would obviously know from factory what to expect when, can I do something differently or creatively in the market space to work on that? So this sort of aligns the whole business decisions that goes in there, and then can I automate it, right? So once you can align these use cases to be able to support all these scenarios, then you could go beyond that and talk about more of a NLP and science, kind of try to find avenues of how would you support these processes. Want to just align what does the complexity of data looks like, right? So we are obviously a consumer company. We compete with all of the big names like Bose and Beats and those from a music side to it. So all of our verticals kind of compete with different product portfolios out in the market. So this is one of the cases where I need to look at what are people saying about. Though we are B2B, we don't never sell maybe some products on our website, but everything is B2B. But you need to know what the consumer is saying about your products, about computer products, and figure out a way to analyze that information and act on it. So that's the use case of few of those, but you can see this petabytes of data we scrape for information from all the retail websites for our products and computer products, and we analyze that data. We run sentiment engines on top of it, and then we even do product pricing analysis. If on Amazon somebody else is selling my product, I lose the buy button. How many times do I lose that? When does Amazon start price matching that? So we need to actually have that information available to act on it to ensure revenue bottom line is not impacted. So huge volumes of data. It is reviews, it's changing. You are at the mercy of external websites which can keep on changing, and it's a gray area when you're looking at streaming technologies, right? So just an example, I have a few of those charts. This is what we're tracking. So that shows Amazon's pricing here. That's third-party pricing. So you can see for this time frame when a third-party marketplace dropped it, Amazon started matching it. And you could see that for whatever reason they found some product somewhere which fell off the truck, somewhere in APAC, and it started selling in AMR, for example. You would see how much revenue you're going to lose. So we need to act smart and be right here rather than wasting that. And this is what we enable the business to work on. So with all these use cases, there was a need to get some new technology in place and figure out how do we go about helping and enabling business to get to that point, right? So a few of them are NLP is one of them, and I'm not going to go in the demo, but this is essentially I have a screenshot of that where it says, I don't want to do a dashboard for business anymore. I want to go beyond where the salespeople can ask targeted questions, and I want targeted answer back. And maybe it will be helpful instead of giving me a number to have an English narrative around it, right? So that's NLP analysis. We being engineering and hardware based, we obviously are BP, and we said why not go beyond that? Let me have an Alexa integration where I ask a question, the same question, and it actually answers me back. So my CEO would love it. And we already work in that ecosystem, so that's another thing that we are actually built for him. So it's not like generic, but we have screens like that in our hardware where you could interact with data and just get your answers. Next step is to put an Alexa or our own hardware which talks and gives you that narrative back. So these are some more of an advanced analytics that goes beyond it. Another one is the text analytics stack, where the reviews that we have scraped in the previous slide that I talked about, we actually analyze it this way. So I could figure out what are the problems, praises, suggestions, and then feed this to engineering as well as customer care. So you could target whom do you address and what are the critical ones that engineering essentially need to address here. Or did I get mentions which are more negative and then positive? So this is more of a sentiment text analytics that happens on top of that platform. So, and this is kind of an end product for the business to consume. So they can go on the praises and still see when did that review come and from whom. Directly on Amazon, so it is linked back, so they could address that in there. The question and answer go on Amazon itself. So they would let them interact from this tool set. So that's one of the NLP thing where you actually see, if I had just a dashboard, that would be the answer that came back. But we go beyond that with the taxonomy behind it, and it essentially gives an English language, but it goes from just that number to beyond where it says, it kind of compares to everything else in the ecosystem, figures out what's the number that would give more insight to somebody at a CEO or a upper management level. It also can, based on taxonomy, say this is, by the way, X% of the competitive product that we have in the market. So that's more of an advanced analytics, but the consumption ways, this gives way more value than just a dashboard that we have on the screen. So not for everybody, it's much more of an upper management side to it, or salespeople who are looking at specific therapies. So with this kind of technology, we needed to figure out how do I integrate? Do I just go with an traditional integration of data movement? Do I go with something like an Oracle SOA Fusion stack from a software implementation perspective? And we want to enable businesses to have something where they could actually have workflow-based integrations as well. So that's one of the offerings that we have is when you build like a recipe where it says, when I'm interacting with different SaaS models, for example, Salesforce, I want to say, when something happens in Salesforce, I want to create something else in Zendesk, while at it, if it matches something else, send me an email, if not, do something. So it is English language driven workflow which internally writes that code. So now you could have an analyst figuring out a business workflow to be implemented, and that's the integration. So you no longer do this 6 to 8 weeks of integration effort. This recipe will and test in like a 2-hour thing in Sandbox, and you could actually deploy it. So now you are enabling your business IT liaisons to go and build this. It's no longer a core function of IT. So it's being, like I said, being agile to make sure you are enabling the platform for business to be successful. One of those is like looking at intelligent platforms that are out there. I mean, this is, I guess, everybody's dream saying, I need all of these real-time on-demand on any platform that I use. Some of them obviously are possible, some of them are challenges, but we do look at all of this as our advanced analytics offerings where we want to go beyond just reporting and we have, how do I show computer advantage, how do I match the marketing and demand supply updates to the. So this is essentially the rationale behind why we needed to reinvent what we have been doing so far. So with that that's my solution architecture that we exposed today. You could see I've mapped all the sources of data, whether they are internal, external. This is centerpiece is all AWS services. We are into AWS ecosystem, but we do run competitive products which actually compete with AWS. For example, Snowflake actually competes with Redshift, right? But if you look at it, they are Lego pieces. I could swap out Redshift, replace it Snowflake tomorrow, so there's another offering I could just replace. And the reason I could take care of that is the big data virtualization layer out here. So we use Denodo as our partner for data virtualization. We do not allow anybody or any business or IT folks to come directly to the backend of it, right? So we cannot become too agnostic to the fact. So we talk about a few of those here. We use Pentaho Stack to orchestrate data ingestion process. Doesn't mean we always ingest everything. There's always some of those services which directly can embed or plug into the virtualization. So now you have an opportunity to go look at Redshift traditional data and marry that to an external service or API call from Google Analytics, which directly gets exposed from data virtualization. So now I don't have to pull that data and put it in my warehouse. I can just at runtime connect on the virtualization and still allowed to support from anywhere. So what we've done in the Denodo layer is create business entities and governance and security and tracking at the single layer. So that allows me to go create business entities which are no longer siloed. There are no data marts beyond that. In the past we had multiple data marts and which would cause an issue with the data not matching, the latency of it, right? So,
question.
Yeah.
So Denodo data virtualization here, this is all in cloud or
yes.
You have a hybrid implementation of
no, so right now what we've done is we run all of these, the whole stack in AWS.
Okay.
Right, so I mean, not that they are services. So this is actually running on an EC2 instance. So we have a licensed version. They do have a cloud offering, but when we started with them, they only had like an on-prem install. So, but we run it in our VPC on AWS on an EC2 instance. The same is true with actually a lot of these. So Pentaho, Tableau, we run actually them in EC2 instances. So the data movement challenge is where you need, when you take the data out of AWS, you have to pay for it, and that's essentially gone away with this. So when you go to cloud, essentially you need to look at every point, does it add cost to the bottom line, right? Because it's thin fine print in there. So we do track, so we run EMR on the pricing bucket of AWS and keep a track of it. So it's a real-time thing saying if the costs go up, there's something going on that. So everything is self-service now. We don't essentially build any reports in Tableau. So business actually can go. So we kind of say, position it this way that bring your own tool to the party, right? So now they want to play with Looker or R or Python or NLP services, they all embed into the data virtualization layer. So this is critical part of our architecture. And this essentially made sure that we move away from this traditional management and the DBA backups and stuff. So even the Redshift and Snowflake, it's an automated snapshot backup which happens every day at a logical end of the day, and it prunes, so it gives 7 days of copy and then keeps on pruning that data. So, but nobody has to go and do a backup. Yes.
So is there data that's available in like Redshift that isn't exposed through the virtualization layer?
Yes, so that's possible because on the virtualization we could decide. So when you do dimension modeling, right? So you could think about a lot of parameters, flags that you add for some creative ways of handling information that may not be right for business consumption. We actually hide that in the virtualization layer. We enable the joins of dimensions to facts in that layer instead of Tableau doing its own, because most of the time people would do left auto joins or maybe do the right. So we cannot guarantee the results of it. So we cannot make that transparent in the virtualization layer. So they'll see one object, you connect Tableau to it, it's just going to put measures and dimensions. So it becomes easier and we could control the outcome of that report. Right? So we know exactly how they should be joined. We could rename some of those components to make it business friendly. There's a taxonomy behind it, business glossary to it, as well as a lineage to it. So if I change some attribute, I can actually do a data lineage and impact analysis in the virtualization layer. Even if it's changed in the ETL layers, I know exactly what will be impacted from a business perspective. And we can come back to it if there are questions specifically to certain services there, but like I said, we could enable any of these services and we want to enable business to go play more and more. Right? There's a lot of people who love using Python and R for advanced analytics, and we just open up that on sandbox.
But they'd be doing that against the data virtualization.
Correct, yeah, so it allows northbound, southbound integrations, not that we allow everywhere, but sandboxing concept is very much in there, so they could just pull the data and any change that they need, it takes minutes and not a week's cycle if you have to do the ETL. So 2 years back when I was brought into Logitech, the goal was essentially find something that makes our whole ecosystem cheaper, more agile, more proactive to it, right? So we looked at different cloud offerings. Obviously, AWS has been premier out there. We worked with Google, Azure. We are not typically Microsoft house, so that was a little bit discounted. I think Azure is right there, but AWS obviously has been evolved a whole much more than other services. So we went with AWS. We were looking at the cost was definitely a critical piece. We wanted something that would scale beyond what we are doing. So our warehouse in Oracle Exadata is 25 terabytes, something like that. We couldn't even process the whole Amazon reviews out in there. It just won't return anything if you do more than a quarter of data. And here, business wanted to go back 7 years of data. So there's no way to scale anything on Exadata. So, and obviously it does cost way more than what we're paying today. So those were some of those needs of the hour at that point of time. Obviously we have evolved way more than that. But that's what business wanted. We from IT wanted to free up all resources to go beyond just the tactical efforts to it, but be more closely integrated with business. And you see why virtualization, it's come a long way. Gartner, our conferences talk about why one would need to speak to deliver is critical for business to be successful, right? So you cannot any longer move data or petabytes of data into a warehouse on S3 or wherever and then analyze it. There's no way you will be able to do that, right? So it goes back to the concept of push your code to the data, get the processing, and only get your results back and not look at the whole data set.
So, quick question on virtualization layers, infrastructure footprint. How do you?
We run it at core right now, production server. But again, it's an EC2, so you could scale it as long as the licensing allows it. Right now, they're
Single node.
yes, yes, absolutely.
And
I mean, we have not had much challenges from an infrastructure perspective. What happens is if you have too much data that you need to cater. So like we do Salesforce reporting, we never pull data from Salesforce, right? So we actually push the queries to Salesforce and get the data back. So the key to it is if there's low latency data, you could actually do mix and match. So you could cache something in your virtualization layer and rest of the data can be real time. So the virtualization layers allow you to do such, where some of it can be trickle fed incrementally into a cache. The end goal is to get a few seconds of results for business to work on, right? So there are creative ways of doing the virtualization platforms. Some of the benefits out here, obviously, the biggest one is the semantic repository, a single one, and then you could do all of this governance. So when you have a SOX compliance issue, that would be critical for you to say, this is the only way we allow anybody to do. I mean, data lake being big, we wanted to have folks access to raw data as well. So we treat S3 as a data lake. We have, obviously, we use Athena, but we also have exposed S3 through virtualization layer. So I have a slide which actually talks that. So these are all the things that I have exposed through Denodo today. Some of them you can see is SFDC, data warehousing, but we also do a lot more with Facebook. So some of our businesses work with business Facebook for campaign management, right? I don't want to pull that data. What we do is we expose the API through virtualization stuff. So for them, it's just drag and drop for reporting, but in real time, it actually is calling the REST API and getting the data back. Oh, no, so these are not all products. These are more of the sources that we have. So the ERP is on-prem. These are services. SFDC obviously is SAP is external service. So I'm just kind of depicting what are the exposed through virtualization to some users.
So in the virtualization, you are having the on-prem source and the cloud source?
Yeah, yes. Because Amazon will not cost you to bring data in. So I mean the performance might be a little bit slow, but if it's in your VPC, you can get away with the pipeline that you have at AWS, but it will allow you to do transaction reporting from EBS directly. Yeah, so you don't have to go with certain things on EBS for reporting. Plus, you don't need to have concurrent jobs to get your reports out, but you could actually do real-time reporting. The query will get pushed, this does get pushed down. So it's going to run on EBS, but you could actually interact with any of the tools that you have in the ecosystem. So this is sort of our traditional reporting, but we also have advanced analytics moving on top of it. Just here's this more of the benefits around what all we could achieve. So apart from the business layer enablement, sandboxing for data science, we do audits where you could join multiple sources. So you could do EBS to data warehousing reporting together in virtualization in real time, get the data in the platform in memory and match it and give output back to it. So people could do A/B comparative analysis. And this is specific to the platform, but it goes beyond just average implementation. You have data lineage, which is critical. You have representation of the data model, so you know exactly how the joins are in the ecosystem, right? You could obviously expose all of those and database services. You could write some innovative queries on the platform itself, right, to play with it. It can also be a sort of a reporting tool on top of the data. So why cloud, why data virtualization? This is some of those things where we move from being a reactive reporting environment to being proactive data science enabled and advanced analytics enabled. Obviously we do, with that we had to innovate how we build our code. So we use Pentaho for orchestration, but it's all template driven. So there's no longer a handshake that needs from every time a developer leaves, right? It's a template driven which you inherit and only make certain changes. Everything is embedded in that. So whenever the job fails, it creates a data ticket. On the API call, it sends an email. When it's success, it does X. So all template is standard. So all code looks same. When you do ETL code, we don't let people just build with their own style of development. It's actually all template driven. So it's really fast. There are a lot of tools that obviously some of the cons were Denodo, it's like 10, 12 companies company, but still there are some players in the ecosystem like Tableau, for example. They took a while to get you a native driver for Denodo. So when you don't have native drivers from reporting perspective, the queries that it generates on a generic ODBC are different. So you might have issues with performance, and that's one thing when you work with those ecosystems, you need to figure out all the players in the ecosystem and what's important as an org. So we made it clear that virtualization is not going anywhere, and Tableau actually had to come there. So we have a Tableau driver now, but it took some time and some effort from our side as well. But for the most part, whoever uses JDBC are the newest stacks of tool, they work flawlessly. I'll get you the slide there. You will see this slide, but just use a reference architecture that today we have some components in place, tomorrow I can add a few more, like we use Spark, Cloud-based, Cassandra, so they will all embed in that platform. When I was talking about the Lego component tools, you could put in there based on the use cases. I mean, you don't want to over-engineer something and just make it available as a tech stack and pay for it, but kind of have a component where you could just plug in a new component. Like we had log management and some of these things actually write back data. As I'm presenting, actually writing that data, and we needed a real-time thing, so we use Kafka for that. Right? So it processes the data, and then I can actually run the dashboard from the virtualization there and figure out what did I use? Did I use Windows OS? What version of it? Did I use PowerPoint or something else to present? Things like that. So that's, we don't capture me as a person presenting it here, but it's more of the engineering data, and we capture the logs about it.
Yeah, can you go back one?
Sure.
So what is this data virtualization? I understand.
So you could, sometimes you have a need to ingest data, right, from an external service. Let's say Zendesk, for example. You want to pull data out of SFTC. Some objects you still need to pull in your data warehousing to do some time-bound, time series analysis. So you could actually use the same tool because it has a native adapter to use as an exposing as a source for ETL. So you could connect your ETL tool to virtualization, which will in turn pull data. So it's more of virtualizing a source for ETL processing. Sometimes you use virtualization to push down the query and do analysis or processing on the source. So things like that. So we do northbound, southbound integrations with it. But it allows me, I can actually write back to a SFTC as well. So if I build like an OutSystems app on the phone, I could interact with the virtualization layer to even update back. It does not only read only, you could do both.
I have a CDC, which I think is change data capture, and that is not closer to the source, but virtualization is in the
Correct.
So
Yes.
How is that?
Because it can keep track of the changes that have been occurred. So like I was showing you the use case where you want to cache some information. So now that it has a snapshot of your last pull, you could actually do the CDC out there and creatively think of only insert on both sides.
This is in the
Yes. Yeah, they do customer 360. I mean, we not implemented it, but there are use cases which can allow you to do a customer 360, everything virtual. So they, I wouldn't say every time you want to do everything as virtual data warehouses, but you could potentially look at some of them as only virtual maps. So you could build a model which runs off of, let's say, SFTC, and you can get away with zero data movement and still achieve what you want to do. That's one thing that we are actually interacting in the IoT space on the engineering side, where we're looking at Denodo, not necessarily to interact, but it's more of the consumption of that information. As you can see, we ingest this information through Kafka, which is more streaming. We look at a couple of offerings, it's still up in the air, like do I use SQL stream, and it's again based on the cost. But we absolutely have the need. Today we consume it, is just, do I get better performance with Kafka, or do I do a SQL stream or something like that, right? So, but we do have traction to add virtualization on the CPU track. So I can't roll up to CIO track, but it is on the CPU side to it. So there are a couple of those options. I'll just leave it the architecture side to it, but you could do multiple things like reading buffers as well, or just getting actual data from the sources. But we allow you to join and get data from different places and do quick analysis. You don't have to analyze the JSON files that come from the hardware and take time to ingest it. Running out of time. So that's just the benefits slide. Talks about why what benefit we derive from a business perspective. There's definitely a lot of traction. Business is really happy with the way it's turned out and the performance that we get. So they are able to do more and more on the platform now. And we hope to get to that level one day where everything is through the virtualization layer. That will be like the footprint. You can see not a downside of that. But it's just ease of use and speed to deliver that it brings that to the forefront. And that's all I had. A lot of content. Just passionate about when I talk about it, but there's success to it. So now it's been well received in the industry. I've had revalidations with that. Amazon, Snowflake folks actually do work with Lenovo as well now, because just the way it helps enterprises be more agile.
So when you said BPDL, so information system, mostly specs, right? Not to write that, right? How do you write that to virtualization?
Because adapters will allow you, so Salesforce adapter will allow you to write patches and if you are absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.